You know, there's a specific kind of tired you feel when you've worked your whole life for a slice of peace, only to have someone try to snatch it away just because they're bored. I'm a simple guy. I like my lawn green, my beer cold, and my weekends quiet. I worked double shifts and saved for 5 years to put in a pool for my family. It wasn't an Olympic natatorium, just a nice, kidney-shaped oasis in the backyard where my kids could practice their cannonballs and my wife, Sarah, could float with a margarita. It was our sanctuary. It was the one thing that made the scorching summers bearable. But apparently, to the woman living 3 doors down, my sanctuary was a personal insult. Let's call her Brenda. Brenda was the president of the Homeowners Association for the subdivision adjacent to my property. Now, here is the critical detail you need to remember. I do not live in the HOA. My property line is exactly 3 feet outside their jurisdiction. I bought this land specifically because it was unincorporated. I answer to the county, not to a board of people who measure grass height with a ruler. But Brenda? Brenda didn't believe in boundaries. She believed in control. She was the kind of woman who walked around the neighborhood with a clipboard like it was a royal scepter. She had that haircut, you know the one, and a permanent look of disapproval etched into her face, like she smelled something rotting wherever she went. It started small. She'd leave flyers in my mailbox, which is a federal crime, by the way, about neighborhood aesthetic cohesion. She claimed my pool cover was the wrong shade of blue. She said my grill smoke was drifting aggressively into her domain. I ignored her. I figured if I didn't engage, she'd find another hobby. I was wrong. The escalation happened on a Tuesday. I was in the pool with my 2 kids, having a splash fight. We were laughing, having a good time. Suddenly, the gate latch clicked. I looked up, wiping water from my eyes, and there she was. Brenda, standing in my backyard, hands on her hips, looking at us like we were vermin. "Excuse me," she shouted over the splashing. "You need to evacuate this pool immediately." I stood up, water dripping off my chin. "Who are you? And why are you in my backyard?" "I'm Brenda, HOA president," she announced, as if that title carried legal weight in my yard. "This pool is a hazard. It's attracting mosquitoes, it's noisy, and quite frankly, it looks like a breeding ground for disease. I am ordering you to clear it out. Now." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Brenda, get off my property. I'm not in your HOA. Your rules stop at the fence line." She turned a shade of purple I didn't know humans could achieve. "I am responsible for the safety of this community. If you won't clear the pool, I will call the police and report you for child endangerment. Unsupervised children in unsanitary water." My wife was sitting right there on the patio reading a book. "Unsupervised?" I asked. "My wife is a nurse. She's 10 feet away. I'm calling." Brenda shrieked, pulling out her phone. And she did. She actually called 911 because a family was swimming in their own pool. I ushered the kids inside because I didn't want them to see their dad lose his temper. 10 minutes later, a squad car pulled up. The officer looked exhausted. He listened to Brenda rant about community standards and potential drowning hazards. Then he looked at me, looked at my permits which I happily taped to the window, and looked back at Brenda. "Ma'am," the officer said, in that tone reserved for toddlers and drunk people, "this is private property. There is no crime here. If you come onto his land again without permission, I'm going to cite you for trespassing. Go home." Brenda huffed, glared at me like I'd just kicked her cat, and stormed off. I thought that was the end of it. I thought she'd lick her wounds and move on to terrorizing someone about their trash cans. But I underestimated the level of delusion I was dealing with. See, in Brenda's mind, the police were just wrong. The law was wrong. She was right. And if she was right, then my pool wasn't really my pool. It was an asset. An asset she decided the community deserved to use since I was clearly irresponsible. 2 weeks later, my family and I went out of town for the day to visit my in-laws. We came back around 4 p.m. on a scorching Saturday. As we pulled into the driveway, I heard music. Loud, thumping bass. I looked at Sarah. "Did you leave the radio on?" "No," she said, looking confused. I got out of the truck and walked around the side of the house. My jaw hit the floor. There were easily 30 people in my backyard. Strangers. They were on my lounge chairs. They were drinking beer out of red Solo cups. And the pool? The pool was packed. Kids screaming, adults floating on my rafts, a volleyball net strung up across the middle. And there, sitting at a folding table near the gate, was Brenda. She had a little cash box and a sign made of poster board and glitter glue that read, HOA Summer Splash, entry $5. She was charging people admission to my house. I saw red. Not just anger, rage. Pure, blinding rage. I started to march over there, ready to flip that table and scream until my lungs gave out. But Sarah grabbed my arm. "Jack, stop," she whispered. "Look at her. Look at how smug she is." I looked. Brenda was beaming. She was holding court, chatting with neighbors, acting like the benevolent queen who had graciously provided this amenity. She genuinely believed she had commandeered my property for the greater good. "If you go over there screaming," Sarah said, her eyes narrowing, "you look like the crazy guy ruining the party. She wants a reaction. Don't give her one." "So what do?" I hissed. "Let them stay." Sarah smiled, and it was a terrifying thing to witness. "No, we don't let them stay, but we don't kick them out, either. We just change the conditions." She nodded toward the side of the house where the pool equipment pad was located, hidden behind a trellis. "Drain it," she whispered. I looked at her. I looked at the pool pump. I looked at the crowd of strangers frolicking in my water. A slow grin spread across my face. I snuck around the far side of the bushes, moving quiet as a ghost. I got to the equipment pad. I located the main waste valve. Usually, you use this to lower the water level after a heavy rain. But if you open it all the way, it's a direct line out to the storm drain in the lower field. I gripped the handle. I looked at Brenda one last time, watching her stuff a $5 bill into her box. I yanked the valve open. The pump roared for a second, changing pitch as the pressure shifted, but with the music blaring, nobody noticed. I slipped into the house through the back door and stood in the kitchen window with Sarah, watching. It didn't happen instantly. It was a slow, creeping realization. About 10 minutes in, a guy on a flow tie frowned. He pushed off the bottom, but his foot hit concrete sooner than he expected. He looked around, confused. Then, the water level dropped below the skimmers. The loud shhhshhhhh sound of the skimmers sucking air cut through the music. People stopped talking. "Hey," someone yelled. "The water's going down." Brenda looked up from her cash box. "Don't be silly," she called out. "It's just evaporation." Evaporation. Right. 5 minutes later, the top step was dry. The water was receding visibly now, swirling toward the main drain at the bottom. It was like a giant invisible hand was pulling the plug. Panic started to set in. Not fear panic, but awkward panic. People realized something was wrong. They started climbing out, grabbing their towels. The volleyball net sagged as the water supporting the poles disappeared. Brenda marched over to the edge, looking frantic. She peered into the water, then looked around wild-eyed. "Who is doing this? Stop it. This is an authorized event." I stepped out onto the back porch then. I didn't yell. I just leaned against the railing, crossed my arms, and took a sip of iced tea Sarah had handed me. "Hey, Brenda," I called out. The music stopped. Every head turned toward me. "Problem with the amenities?" I asked, voice calm, carrying over the yard. Brenda went pale. She pointed a shaking finger at me. You're sabotaging the community gathering. You're ruining everything." "Me?" I feigned shock. "I'm just doing maintenance. See, I didn't schedule any pool parties today, so I figured it was a good time to drain and clean the liner. Since it's my pool." The silence that followed was heavy. The guests looked from me to Brenda. "Wait," a guy in swim trunks asked, looking at Brenda. "I thought you said the HOA acquired this land." "She said a lot of things," I said, walking down the steps. "Like how she has the right to charge you $5 to trespass on private property." The mood shifted instantly. The guests weren't mad at me anymore. They were looking at Brenda like she was a con artist. Which, technically, she was. I was providing a service. Brenda stammered, backing up as people started demanding their money back. "He's being selfish. He never uses it." "Get out," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was hard enough to cut glass. "Everyone, you are trespassing. The police are on their way." Again, that was the magic word. The party dissolved. People grabbed their coolers and kids and scrambled for the gate. Brenda was left standing alone by her folding table, clutching her cash box. The water was gone now. Just a wet, concrete bowl with a few stranded pool noodles at the bottom. "You're a monster," she whispered, tears of frustration in her eyes. "No, Brenda," I said. "I'm a homeowner, and you're just a thief with a clipboard. Now get off my land before I have you arrested for theft of services." That water costs money. She ran. She actually ran. The cops showed up about 10 minutes later. I had called them right after I opened the valve. They took a report. They looked at the cash box she'd left behind in her panic. They took witness statements from a few neighbors who were still lingering on the street, angry about being duped. The fallout was spectacular. Word spread fast. The HOA pool party scandal became the talk of the town. It turned out Brenda had pocketed the entry fees for herself. She hadn't logged them in the HOA books. That was the final nail. The board held an emergency meeting the following Tuesday. They didn't just fire her. They threatened to sue her for fraud if she didn't resign and pay back every cent she'd skimmed over the years. She moved out 3 months later. I heard she went to a condo complex in Florida. I pity those people. Refilling the pool cost me about $300, but watching Brenda's little empire crumble while she stood next to a draining pool, that was priceless. But you know it's funny. Brenda isn't unique. There seems to be a pandemic of entitlement going around these days. It's like people have forgotten that other humans exist. Take this next story, for example. It happened to a buddy of mine on a long-haul flight, and it just proves that the me-first attitude isn't limited to the suburbs. It's cruising at 30,000 feet. My friend, let's call him Mike, is a vegetarian. Not the preachy kind, just a health thing. So, on international flights, he always pre-orders the special meal. If you've flown a lot, you know the drill. Special meals come out first, usually about 20 minutes before the main cart service starts. So, Mike is sitting there in economy, crammed in next to a stranger. The flight attendant brings his tray, some pasta dish, and sets it down. Mike's hungry, so he unwraps the silverware and takes a bite. Suddenly, the guy next to him huffs loudly. Mike ignores it. He takes another bite. The guy taps him on the shoulder. Hard. "Excuse me," the stranger says, his face red. "Do you have no manners?" Mike looks around, confused. "What? You're eating," the guy snaps. "My food isn't here yet." It is incredibly rude to start eating before everyone at the table has been served. Mike stares at him. "The table? Dude, we're on a Boeing 747, not at a dinner party. This is a tray table. It's basic etiquette," the guy insists, actually reaching out to try and cover Mike's food tray. "You wait until everyone is served. You are ruining my flight experience with your selfishness." Mike just looked at him, fork halfway to his mouth. "Buddy, I ordered the special meal. You didn't. I'm not letting my pasta get cold just because you wanted the chicken. Mind your own business." The guy sat there fuming, arms crossed, staring daggers at Mike for the next 6 hours. Imagine having an ego so fragile that someone eating noodles in the seat next to you feels like a personal attack. But sometimes, karma works faster than a draining pool. There was this other situation in a gated community down in Florida. They had a private boat ramp. Now, similar to my pool situation, there was one homeowner who thought the rules didn't apply to him. This guy, let's call him Trucker Tom, kept parking his massive pickup truck right on the grass next to the ramp, tearing up the sod. The HOA warned him. He ignored it. They put up signs. He ripped them down. Finally, he started parking on the ramp itself, blocking everyone else from launching their boats, just so he didn't have to walk an extra 50 feet to the parking lot. One Saturday, he backs his boat trailer down, loads his boat, and leaves the truck parked diagonally across the ramp while he goes to grab a cooler. He's blocking 3 families. Someone calls a tow truck. The tow driver arrives, hooks up the truck, and starts to pull. But Tom had parked on a patch of slick algae near the waterline. As the tow truck pulls, Tom's truck tires lose traction. It slides, not up the ramp, but sideways. Tom comes running back just in time to watch his $60,000 pickup slide backward, slow motion, into the lake. The best part? He had left the windows down to keep it cool. The water rushed in. By the time it stopped, the water was up to the door handles. The tow driver just stood there, shaking his head, and said, "Well, I can pull it out, but it's going to cost extra for marine salvage." Tom screamed. The neighbors cheered. Entitlement sinks, folks. Literally. And speaking of sinking, let's talk about family. You'd think blood is thicker than water, but sometimes money thins it out real quick. I read this story about a woman, let's call her Lee. She was Asian American, engaged to a white guy. In her culture, there's a tradition of a bride price, money the groom gives to the bride's family. It's old school, but some families still do it. Lee's older sister, who we'll call Amy, calls her up. Amy had moved out years ago, barely visited, never helped when their mom had a stroke. Lee had been the sole caregiver for their mom for a decade, sacrificing her social life, her finances, everything. Amy calls and says, "So, for the wedding, make sure your fiancé knows the bride price goes to me." Lee is stunned. "Why would it go to you? Mom is alive." "Mom has dementia," Amy says coldly. "She can't use the money. And I raised you when we were kids, so I deserve it as repayment." The raising she did? Babysitting a few times when Lee was 8. Lee told her, "We're having an American wedding. No bride price. And even if there was, you wouldn't see a dime of it." Amy threw a fit. She threatened to boycott the wedding. She told the whole extended family Lee was being greedy. Lee's response? She uninvited Amy. She blocked her number. She realized that just because you share DNA doesn't mean you share a wallet. Sometimes, you have to drain the pool on your own family to keep your sanity. But the most chilling story I've heard recently? It's about a girl who lost her parents at 15. Orphaned. Her older brother stepped up, became her guardian, and kept the family home running until she turned 19. The house was paid off. It was hers legally. One day, she comes home from college classes, exhausted, and finds a padlock on her front door. A man is standing there. The HOA president. A nasty piece of work who had hated her mother. "What are you doing?" she asks. "I'm securing the asset," he sneers. "Your parents are dead. You're squatting. The HOA is taking possession of this abandoned property." He was trying to steal her house. He knew she was young, grieving, and probably didn't know real estate law. He thought he could bully her out of a $500,000 home. She called her brother. He showed up, furious. Then she called the cops. The officer arrives. The HOA guy starts lying, saying she's a squatter, that the deed is void. The girl goes to her car, unlocks the glove box, and pulls out the deed. Her name, clear as day. The officer looks at the HOA guy and says, "Unlock this door, or you're going to jail for illegal eviction and harassment." The guy unlocks it, but he doesn't stop. He sues her. He takes an orphan to court to try and steal her inheritance. The judge? He wasn't having it. He looked at the evidence, looked at the grieving girl, and then looked at the HOA president. He didn't just dismiss the case, he tore the guy apart. He ordered the HOA to pay all her legal fees and issued a restraining order against the president. He essentially said, "If you ever come near this girl again, bring a toothbrush because you're not going home." It's scary what people will do when they think you're weak. And finally, just to cleanse the palate, a little petty revenge. Because sometimes, you don't need a judge. You just need lipstick. A girl gets dumped by her boyfriend. He was mean about it, cheated on her, called her names, the works. He worked as a dishwasher at a local bistro. His one big complaint? He hated scrubbing lipstick stains off glasses. Said it was the bane of his existence. So, the girl gathers her squad. 6 of them. They go to the bistro during his shift. They order rounds of water, smoothies, cocktails, coffee, and before every sip, they apply a fresh, thick coat of waterproof, 24-hour stay, bright red lipstick. They went through 40 glasses in 2 hours. Every single one of them marked with a heavy, red ring of vengeance. When they left, they walked past the kitchen. They saw him at the sink, scrubbing furiously, sweating, looking miserable. He looked up, saw them smiling with their perfect red lips, and he knew. He just knew. It's the little things, folks. So look, whether it's an HOA president trying to steal your pool, or a stranger demanding you wait to eat your dinner, the world is full of people who think they matter more than you. They don't. Stand your ground. Know your rights. Keep your deeds handy. And if you have to, don't be afraid to pull the plug and drain the water. Sometimes, leaving them high and dry is the only way to remind them where the boundary line actually is. If you've ever had a neighbor from hell, or an HOA story that makes my pool incident look tame, let me know in the comments. I read them all. And if you enjoyed watching a Karen get her comeuppance, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps the channel, and honestly, it helps me pay for the water bill to refill the pool. Stay safe out there, guys. And remember, good fences make good neighbors, but a locked gate makes for a peaceful life. See you in the next one.